On the night of December 2, 1984, the city of Bhopal in central India became the site of the world's worst industrial disaster. Over 500,000 people were exposed to toxic gas, thousands died within hours, and many more have continued to suffer across generations. This is not just a story of corporate negligence, but of government oversight failure, human suffering, and the long shadow of injustice. The Bhopal gas tragedy is a chilling reminder of what happens when profit is valued over people and safety is sacrificed at the altar of expediency. The Union Carbide India Limited (UCIL) pesticide plant in Bhopal was built in the 1970s. As part of India's push for agricultural self-sufficiency, the plant was meant to produce a pesticide called 7, whose main ingredient was methyl isocyanate, better known as MICA, highly toxic chemical. From the very beginning, safety concerns surrounded the storage and handling of MICA. I see it as a substance so volatile that even minor contact with water could trigger a deadly reaction. Yet the plant was situated near densely populated neighborhoods, many of them informal settlements where some of the poorest residents of Bhopal lived. By the early 1980s, the plant's operations had been scaled down. Profits had fallen, and corners were being cut. Critical safety systems were either malfunctioning or completely decommissioned. Alarms had been silenced, staff was reduced, and maintenance was lax. Tanks meant to store MIC were overfilled. Refrigeration systems were shut off to save costs. And trained workers had either left or been replaced with less experienced personnel. In essence, a ticking time bomb was placed in the middle of a city, and no one in power seemed to care. On the evening of December 2nd, water entered one of the MIC storage tanks. The chemical reaction began quickly. Pressure built up inside the tank. By midnight, the tank's safety valve blew open, releasing a dense, deadly cloud of methyl isocyanate gas into the air. The winds carried it toward the slums surrounding the plant. People woke up coughing, choking, gasping for breath. Some collapsed and died in their sleep. Others ran blinded by the gas, confused, terrified. The city descended into chaos. In less than an hour, thousands were dead, and this was just the beginning. Hospitals were overwhelmed. No one knew what the gas was, let alone how to treat the symptoms. There was no emergency response plan. Doctors administered treatments blindly. The local government was equally unprepared. Panic spread faster than the gas. Official figures later claimed around 3,000 people died that night, but independent estimates placed the immediate death toll at 8,000, and the long-term fatalities well over 20,000. Nearly 600,000 people were exposed to the gas, and more than 100,000 continue to suffer chronic health problems, respiratory issues, eye disorders, cancer, birth defects, and neurological damage. What happened after the disaster only deepened the tragedy. Union Carbide Corporation (UCC), the US-based parent company of UCIL, attempted to deflect responsibility. They claimed sabotage. They blamed local workers. They denied that their own safety systems were at fault. In the days that followed, then CEO Warren Anderson was arrested briefly by Indian authorities but released on bail and allowed to return to the United States. He never faced trial and remained a fugitive from Indian law until his death in 2014. The victims, meanwhile, waited for justice. In 1989, the Indian government settled with Union Carbide for $470 million, a fraction of what victims and activists had demanded. The settlement was widely criticized for being too low and for absolving the company of further liability. Compensation was slow, inadequate, and riddled with corruption. Many families received less than $500 for the loss of a loved one. Survivors protested, marched, and fought legal battles for decades. Even today, many of them still await comprehensive compensation and medical care. The site of the disaster, the UCIL plant, still sits in Bhopal, abandoned and decaying. It has never been fully cleaned up. Toxic waste remains buried under the soil. Groundwater in surrounding areas is still contaminated, causing illnesses and deformities among children born long after the gas leak. Activists have long demanded that Dow Chemicals, which acquired Union Carbide in 2001, take responsibility for cleanup and provide reparations. but legal and jurisdictional hurdles have stalled any meaningful progress. Over the years, the Bhopal gas tragedy has been the subject of documentaries, court cases, global activism, and political rhetoric. Yet, every year, survivors gather in Bhopal not just to remember the night of horror, but to remind the world that their fight is not over. They live with physical pain, emotional trauma, and the knowledge that those responsible for their suffering have never been held truly accountable. Many questions continue to haunt the narrative. Why were safety protocols so grossly neglected? Why did the Indian government fail to ensure that a high-risk chemical plant was subject to rigorous oversight? Why was Warren Anderson allowed to leave India? Why has there been no international pressure on Dow to take responsibility? And perhaps most hauntingly, could this happen again? The Bhopal tragedy forced the world to rethink industrial safety. It led to new environmental laws in India, the establishment of disaster management protocols, and a shift in public perception of multinational corporations operating in developing countries. Yet, despite all this, the disaster also exposed the weakness of international law when it comes to corporate accountability. When a company based in one country causes harm in another, how do you prosecute it? How do you ensure justice for the victims? These questions remain largely unanswered. In the years that followed, victims built resilience. Survivors' organizations, many led by women, began documenting the health effects, demanding compensation, and pushing for environmental cleanup. They kept the memory alive, not out of bitterness, but because forgetting would mean surrendering. They fought to make Bhopal not just a symbol of pain, but also of resistance. As we reflect on the Bhopal gas tragedy today, 4 decades later, it stands not just as a chapter in India's industrial history, but as a global warning. The world must remember Bhopal not just for its horror, but as a call to action. Industrial safety, environmental justice, corporate accountabilities are not optional concerns. They are essential for a humane society, because if Bhopal taught us anything, it is this. When institutions fail, people suffer. And when we forget, history repeats. So, the next time we hear about chemical factories operating with weak regulations, about governments prioritizing profits over people, or corporations cutting corners in the name of efficiency, let us remember the choking cries in the night, the mass graves, the abandoned homes, and let us say, with collective resolve, never again.